They say silence is golden, but I've learned, often the hard way, it can also be a quiet accomplice to everything we later regret. We stay silent not because we don't care, but because we're afraid. Afraid of shaking the waters, of being seen, of becoming the problem instead of the peacemaker. But let me ask you this. What if silence isn't keeping the peace, but quietly allowing the worst things to continue? Sometimes, saying nothing is the most dangerous thing you can do. It's how injustice thrives, how broken traditions stay unchallenged, how good people end up on the sidelines of their own values. I'm not here to tell you to speak more. I'm here to remind you. There are moments in life, real, defining moments, where your silence costs more than your words ever could. Moments when keeping quiet feels safer, but slowly erodes the very things you stand for. And the Stoics knew this. They weren't loud, but they weren't silent either. They chose their moments. And when those moments came, they didn't whisper. They acted. Let's talk about those moments, because you might be standing in one right now. A comment that's unfair. A rule that doesn't apply equally. Someone gets blamed for something they didn't do, and we see it. We feel that tight twist in our chest, but we say nothing. We tell ourselves, it's not my business. It's not the right time. It's not worth the trouble. But here's the truth I've come to know with time and with mistakes. Every time we choose silence in the face of injustice, we leave the door wide open for it to grow. We think we're being neutral, but silence isn't neutral. It's a vote, and more often than not, it votes with the side that already has the power. Stoic philosophy tells us that justice is not optional. Marcus Aurelius didn't say justice was a nice idea. He said what's not good for the hive is not good for the bee. That means when harm happens to one of us, even if it's not our name on the line, it still matters, because it slowly poisons the whole. Injustice doesn't need our permission. It only needs our silence. I remember early in my career, there was a meeting, 10 people in the room. One of them, a quiet, hard-working colleague, was being accused of a mistake I knew for a fact they didn't make. The numbers were wrong. The timeline didn't add up. But as the tension built and the blame kept landing on them, I sat still. I was afraid to speak. Afraid I'd be seen as difficult. Afraid I'd become the next target. So I said nothing. I walked out of that room with a pit in my stomach that stayed for days. Not because I'd been attacked, but because I'd betrayed something far more important, my values. And worse, I'd betrayed someone who trusted me. That moment taught me something I've never forgotten. Silence might protect your reputation, but it can scar your conscience. And the damage, it doesn't stop with you. When we don't speak, the message to everyone watching is loud and clear. This behavior is okay. This system works as it is. This person deserves this. Injustice thrives in that quiet space where everyone looks away. And over time, those moments build a culture, one where fear wins and truth hides. You don't have to be a hero to interrupt that. You just have to speak. It could be a single sentence. I don't think that's fair. I remember it differently. Can we pause and look at the facts again? Small words. Big impact. That one sentence can shift the air in a room. It can stop the momentum of blame. It can make someone feel seen when everything else is pushing them into the shadows. And it doesn't only help them, it helps you. Because when you speak up against injustice, you step into the kind of person you want to be. You become a mirror for courage in a world that often runs on comfort. The Stoics weren't reckless. They didn't speak just to be loud. They spoke when it mattered, when silence would cost more than courage. And sometimes, your voice is the only thing that stands between someone else and despair. Let that sink in. Someone else might be counting on you to say what they can't. So the next time you see something wrong, at work, in your family, in your community, don't ask, "Will I look bad if I speak?" Ask instead, "What will happen to my integrity if I stay silent?" Because character isn't built in the easy moments. It's built in the quiet ones. The ones where no one would blame you for sitting it out. But you show up anyway. You don't always notice it the first time. Sometimes it's wrapped in a smile or an apology. Sometimes it sounds like, "Come on, it's just once," or "You always help me out." But if you listen closely, you'll hear something else. The quiet sound of your own line being crossed. Boundaries aren't walls. They're not about shutting people out or building distance. They're how we show others and ourselves what respect looks like in real life. They're how we say, "This is where I end," and where your choices don't get to decide who I am. But when we stay silent as those lines are stepped over again and again, we're not just being nice. We're teaching people that our needs are optional, that our dignity is negotiable, that our peace can be borrowed indefinitely. I used to think that setting a boundary meant I was being selfish or dramatic or too sensitive, especially with family. There was a relative in my life, someone I cared about deeply, who had a habit of asking for money, and not just once. It became routine, a pattern dressed up as just one more time. I kept saying yes, because I believed that helping meant giving, that love meant sacrifice, and that no would mean I didn't care. But with every yes I didn't want to give, I felt myself shrinking. Resentment began to grow in places where kindness used to live. I wasn't upset because I gave, I was upset because I felt used. And worse, I'd never said a word. One day I realized something simple but life-changing. Saying nothing doesn't protect the relationship. It poisons it. So I sat down, took a breath, and told the truth. "I love you, but I can't keep lending money with no clarity. It's not about the amount, it's about how it makes me feel. And that matters too." It was uncomfortable. There were tears, some silence, and for a while it felt like I'd made things worse. But in time, things got better. Because now we both knew where we stood. Not in a place of assumption or guilt, but in honesty. That's what boundaries are really about. Not shutting the door, but making sure both people know where the door is, where it opens, where it stays closed. The Stoics believed in self-governance. Epictetus said, "No one is free who is not master of himself." That mastery isn't loud, it's quiet. It's found in the moment you say, "This matters to me," even when it would be easier to just let it slide. A boundary is an act of self-respect. It's how we teach the world to treat us. And when we stay silent, we're not being peaceful, we're being erased. But here's the key. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Speak with clarity, but also with care. Let your words come from a place of truth, not accusation. You can say, "I feel uncomfortable when this happens," or "I want our relationship to be strong, and this behavior makes that harder." Not to blame, but to build. The point of boundaries isn't to win, it's to protect what's worth keeping. And that includes you. Because when your boundaries are clear, your relationships become clearer too. The people who care will step back and listen. The ones who only took, they may walk away. And maybe that's the clarity you needed. If you're sitting in a situation right now where your needs are dismissed, your space ignored, your voice unheard, you don't need to yell, but you do need to speak. Not for them, for you. Because silence says, I'm okay with this, even when you're not. And when you finally do speak, you'll feel something shift, not just in them, but in yourself. A strength that comes from choosing to matter, to yourself. There's a strange kind of silence that wears a suit. It sits quietly in boardrooms, nods in team meetings, smiles politely at family dinners, and it keeps everything comfortable. But comfort isn't always the same as truth. And when truth is needed, when it's the one thing holding the whole picture together, silence becomes something else. It becomes a lie. I've learned this not from books, but from the heat in my chest when I kept my mouth shut, knowing I should have spoken. That moment where your gut tells you, this isn't right, but your lips stay closed anyway. We like to think silence is passive, that not saying anything isn't the same as lying. But what if not speaking is the exact thing that lets the lie grow? What if our silence is the reason someone else is left in the dark? The Stoics were clear on this. Live with virtue. Speak with honesty. Not when it's easy. Anyone can do that. But when it's risky, when it costs you something, that's where your character lives. I remember a day, years ago, sitting in a team meeting. A report was being presented. The charts looked good. The message was optimistic. But I knew something was wrong. I'd helped run the numbers. And some of them weren't just off. They painted a picture that didn't reflect the truth. The presenter didn't mean to lie. They believed what they were saying. But I knew better. And I sat there for minutes that felt like hours, asking myself, should I say something? What if I embarrass them? What if I become the guy who derails the meeting? So I stayed quiet for a while, until my chest felt so tight I knew I couldn't live with myself if I let it slide. I raised my hand, voice calm. I said, I think there's a mistake in this section. I'd be happy to clarify. The room fell quiet. Eyes turned. Tension hung in the air like wet fog. But I wasn't trying to be right. I just wanted to be honest. The report was reviewed, the correction made, and the project moved forward with clarity. Afterwards, a colleague pulled me aside and whispered, I noticed that too, but didn't have the guts to speak. That hit me harder than I expected, not because it made me feel brave, but because I realized how many times I might have done the same in the past, letting someone else carry the weight of silence, letting small falsehoods stack up into something far bigger. We often think honesty has to be loud. It doesn't. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, but it's steady, and it makes space for truth to breathe. Being honest doesn't mean being harsh. You don't have to expose people. You're not here to burn bridges. You're here to hold the line between what's easy and what's right. The Stoics didn't preach honesty because it felt good. They preached it because it keeps your soul aligned. Epictetus said, if it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it. Simple words, hard to live, but the kind that builds trust, slowly, brick by brick. And here's the part people don't talk about. When you start to tell the truth consistently, even in small ways, people begin to trust you. Not just what you say, but who you are. They know that if something's wrong, you won't let it slide. And that kind of presence, it's rare and powerful. But it has to start somewhere. So if you find yourself in a situation, maybe this week, maybe today, where you're tempted to stay quiet to keep things smooth, ask yourself, if I don't say it, who will? And if no one will, then maybe it's meant to be you. You're not speaking to prove anything. You're speaking to protect something, your integrity, their clarity, the truth that sits somewhere in between. In a world full of blurred lines, your honesty might be the one thing that cuts through. Some mistakes look small, a number off in a spreadsheet, a missed detail in a plan, a moment of forgetfulness. And sometimes they are small at first, but left alone, they grow. They spread like cracks in stone, barely visible, until something breaks. I've seen it happen. And I've been part of it. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to be the one who pointed it out. There's this fear many of us carry, that calling out a mistake makes you the enemy, the difficult one, the disruptor. But silence doesn't make the problem go away. It buries it, and buried problems rot. I remember sitting in a meeting early in my career. The team was presenting a set of results to a client. Everything looked solid, except one thing. A minor calculation, off by just a fraction, barely noticeable. But I knew if that number stayed in the report, it would affect the next decision. And then, the next. I hesitated. The person who made the mistake was respected. Everyone else nodded. I could feel the clock ticking in my mind. Say something or let it pass. I almost stayed silent, but something stronger pushed through. Not ego, not the desire to be right, but the simple knowing. If I let this go, I'm not doing my job. I'm not showing up for the people who trust me, and I'm not being the person I promised myself I'd be. So I spoke, gently, with care. I said, before we move forward, I noticed something in this section that might need a second look. The room paused. No one exploded. No one attacked. Instead, they looked again and fixed it. And the next decision, it was better. Here's what that moment taught me. Correcting a mistake isn't an act of criticism. It's an act of stewardship. You're not trying to tear someone down. You're trying to protect the integrity of what you're all building. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Mistakes don't block our path. They are the path to improvement, to wisdom, to doing things better. But only if we face them. The longer we wait, the more they calcify. And when the consequences come, they're harder to explain, harder to fix, harder to own. You don't need to correct every little thing. You don't need to walk around like a truth police. But when something important is at stake, when silence might cost someone else clarity or success, you have a choice. Say nothing, or say something that could prevent a future regret. There's a way to do this with kindness. You can say, "I think we missed something here," or, "Would it help if I double-check that section?" You're not accusing, you're contributing. That's the difference. When we stay quiet because we fear conflict, we betray the trust others have in us. When we speak up with intention and respect, we build that trust deeper. People remember the person who had the courage to speak when no one else would, especially when it saved them from a bigger fall. Mistakes are not failures. They're invitations. And our response? That's what defines the culture we live and work in. If you're in a situation now where you see something off, something avoidable, something no one else has caught, don't wait for someone braver to fix it. Be the one. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. And if someone gets upset, that's okay. It means they care. And in time, they may thank you for the very thing that made them uncomfortable. As Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That includes how we react when the mistake isn't even ours, but still affects what we stand for. Sometimes the most painful part of wisdom is knowing when to share it. We think of knowledge as something we earn, a tool we carry, a badge we wear in quiet pride. But when someone close to us is struggling, really struggling, there's a moment where that knowledge stops being about us and becomes something much deeper, a responsibility. I've been there, watching someone I care about drown in silence, wanting to help, afraid to overstep, afraid my words would feel like judgment, not support. So I waited. And the longer I waited, the heavier it became, because I knew that pain, not in theory, but in the bones. I'd lived it and made it through. That's when I realized not speaking wasn't protecting them. It was protecting me, my comfort, my fear of saying the wrong thing. But their pain wasn't waiting for the perfect sentence. It just needed presence. So I reached out, not with advice, just with truth. I've been through something similar, I said. And if it helps, I'd be honored to share what helped me. That opened a door. And behind that door was a flood of stories, grief, confusion, and eventually, relief. Here's what I learned. When your experience can ease someone else's burden, staying silent doesn't make you humble. It makes you absent. The Stoics believed we are all part of the same whole. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." Your pain, your healing, your hard-won lessons, they're not just yours. They're part of the greater good, if you choose to offer them. Sharing doesn't mean giving a lecture. It doesn't mean fixing someone's life. It simply means showing up, letting them know you're not alone. And that is no small thing. Sometimes your words will be the first thread someone grabs onto when everything else feels like it's falling apart. A friend going through a divorce, a colleague grieving a loss, a sibling stuck in shame or addiction. You don't need a perfect story, just an open heart. Say, "I don't have all the answers, but I've walked that road." And sometimes, that's enough. There's a certain humility in saying, "This helped me, and I'm here if you ever want to talk." You don't force it, you don't make it about you, you plant a seed, and let it grow if and when they're ready. But here's the truth no one tells you. In helping someone else, you heal too. You remember your own strength. You give your pain a purpose. You let your past become light instead of weight. Stoic wisdom reminds us, we can't control how others receive us, but we can control what we offer and how we offer it. Don't share to feel important. Share because it's kind, because it's real, because you wish someone had done the same for you when you needed it most. That's not ego. That's legacy. If you've overcome something, a trauma, a failure, a hard-earned truth, don't let it sit in silence. Let it breathe. Let it serve. Let it become part of someone else's strength. You may not see the impact right away, but trust me, it matters. And one day, when you least expect it, you'll hear your own words echoed back to you. A quiet thank you, a message months later, or just the look in someone's eyes that says, "You helped." And in that moment, you'll know your story, imperfect, scarred, real, wasn't just yours. It was a lifeline. You've just walked through 5 moments in life where silence isn't strength, it's surrender. You've seen how it shows up in injustice, in broken boundaries, in the quiet lie of withheld truth, in the comfort of ignored mistakes, and in the fear of sharing what you know could help someone else. Each moment, so different yet so familiar, has one thread in common. The cost of not speaking is never small. It chips away at who we are, one quiet choice at a time. But this isn't a call to be loud. It's a call to be clear, to live in such a way that your voice reflects what you truly stand for, even if it shakes a little when you use it. The Stoics didn't speak often, but when they did, their words carried weight, because they came from stillness, not from noise, from principle, not from panic. So now ask yourself, in your life, right now, where have you been quiet for too long? And what would it feel like to finally say what you've been holding in? You don't need to raise your voice. You just need to raise your truth. If this message stayed with you, let it echo. Share your own story in the comments, or simply write, "I'm ready to speak." That's all it takes to begin. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because this journey doesn't end here. We'll keep walking this path, quiet when needed, but never silent when it matters. Because as the Stoics taught us, your voice is not just sound, it's your soul in motion.